You know, one of the great opportunities for us to have you here, Hank, is, as the documentary shows, you're a leader who dealt with crisis. And one of the issues we all faced, we certainly faced it in 2008, 9, 10, 11, but we face regularly as business owners how to be clear and decisive during challenging times. When you joined the Bush administration, 2006, publicly, as you did, as you had to, you shared that the financial system was sound in a lot of testimony.
Yeah, right.
And privately, there were some things deteriorating, and as you said, you shared some of that with the president at the time. What's your advice to us? What's your own experience on how to publicly assure the people who are looking to us while privately dealing with the realities and sometimes the terror that's being created by our actions?
Well, generally, which is I think everyone here knows because you've all dealt with them. You know, I dealt with crises before I came to Treasury. And when people say, well, it's much bigger because you're in this big fishbowl and the consequences are so big, I said it's not that different, because when you're boiling in oil, it doesn't make much difference if it's 150, 180, or 200 degrees, right? You know, we all went through this together. And every businessman knows, as I just was saying to someone earlier today, you never have all the information you need when you make a decision, ever. If you do, it's too late and you're looking in the rearview mirror. And the other thing you got to know is how many of you, when you've got a big, ugly, messy problem, there's never going to be a neat, perfect, elegant solution, is there? There just plain isn't. So when you're in a crisis, you're always trading off doing something with some that you don't want to do that's got some negative consequences with the status quo, which is doing nothing, which could be worse. So you've got to be prepared to make decisions, but if you get new facts, then reverse course. Now, as Lewis pointed out, in the financial markets, there's the other issue, which is you don't want to cause panic. You don't want to bring about that which you most fear. And I had all kinds of examples of this that I had to deal with. Like, for instance, after Bear Stearns went, we learned that we did not have the emergency powers to deal with a disintegrating investment bank. We had them for banks, but not for investment banks. You could not, no power to guarantee or put in capital. So the only reason it worked was we had JP Morgan as a buyer. So right after that, right away, we focused on Lehman Brothers, months ahead of it, tried to persuade them to raise capital, but I went up to Capitol Hill and sat down with Barney Frank, with Ben Bernanke, and we explained the problem. And Barney understood it immediately. And he said, but you'll never get these authorities from Congress. You've got no chance of getting them unless you go up and say, guess what, if we don't get this, we're going to lose an investment bank like Lehman, and it's going to be a disaster. Of course, then you would bring about that which you don't want to happen. And when I was up getting the authorities from Congress, you know, part of the problem I had in communicating to the American people that what we were doing was not for the banks but was for Main Street, was I didn't want to say, hey, guess what? It's really, really going to be bad when you're in the middle of an emerging panic. And so Rahm Emanuel at the time, who's now the mayor of Chicago and was then played a very constructive role in this, said to me, listen, you've got your markets and we've got ours, and you're not going to get the vote unless you start to explain how bad this is. So communication when you're dealing with financial markets, it's an order of magnitude different than when you're dealing with other things, because financial institutions are very fragile, and there's no bank that needs to be too big to fail. But during a crisis, almost any bank of size is too big to liquidate immediately. Now, we didn't have the authorities we needed, so you had to prop them up in their current form, which made the public understandably very angry. And they shouldn't be propped up in their current form when they fail, but we didn't have all the tools. But again, financial markets are different. What you least want is panic.